So we have Drew Major with us today, and we are so lucky. He's the nicest guy, and he's absolutely brilliant. Had the pleasure of chatting with him a few weeks ago. He's participated in several successful business ventures, but he's best known for his role as one of the founders and principal engineers at Novell. As one of the major donors in the community, Novell has played an integral part in giving back to Utah County. He is now playing the role of CTO at Sling TV, so let's give it up for Drew Major. Hey, good to see you. Okay, Drew, how are you?
Oh, pretty good.
Pretty good.
Is the mic working?
Is his mic on?
Okay.
Yes?
Good.
Beautiful. Amazing. I want to start right in with you.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to kick it right on off. What was one of the most challenging obstacles you faced in early entrepreneurial years?
Survival. The story of Novell was, it started actually prior to the IBM PC. So this is like 79. And they were building a little proprietary personal computer for business. And they hired myself and a couple of partners, Kyle Powell and Dale Nyber and Mark Hurst, to network these proprietary machines. And I remember walking in the door at Novell and realized they were going to go out of business. It wasn't going to succeed. So we made sure we got paid every week, and we were doing something new, which was kind of, connect them together into a network to share a hard drive. In those days, all PCs had floppy drives, and hard drives were a couple $1,000s, and so the idea was use a network, share a hard drive, and make the PC work better, and also share printers. So we walked in, we did that. A couple months into it, we came in, and everyone was laid off, except us. And the VCs had run out of money, that business wasn't working. And of course, we knew the hardware, but we'd seen this new IBM PC, so we actually got a dentist to buy the first IBM PC sold in Utah, and we decided to network that instead. In the meantime, they don't want to shut it down totally, but it got pretty bad towards the end, like the week before Ray Norda came in with $1 million and picked us up. We were selling desks and chairs to make the payroll. And so, but we had a year of working on making PCs connect to a network to share a hard drive. And so then when Ray Norda came in and brought some money, and we were finally positioned, but we almost failed, and you learn something for that. One time Ray said, there's two things I want to do in my life. And by the way, you may not know Ray Norda. He was the founder. He was kind of one of the first tech billionaires in Utah. Great man, did a lot. But anyway, he told me, he said, I want to have a baby if I could, but he couldn't. He said, these are experiences, and then I like to go bankrupt, because he said, that focuses your mind. And he was a turnaround guy, and he came to Novell to turn us around. Of course, that was why he wanted to buy WordPerfect, because he wanted to turn WordPerfect around. Unfortunately, he wasn't really given the opportunity to do that. But that was his focus. And so, sometimes, if you're facing bankruptcy or failure in your company, it does tend to get rid of, if you're smart, tend to get rid of all the peripheral things, and you really focus in on what you do well.
So if you could go back to Novell and do one thing differently, what would it be?
Well, again, we kind of wrote the book in terms of networking PCs and having them share hard drives. Of course, PCs started to show up with hard drives, and the cost started going down, and so the value of that went down. We could have gone after the whole storage thing, because we kind of dominated server-based storage for years with PCs. And the other guys like EMC and NetApp go into that area that we probably should have gone. But hindsight, it's always clear where you're winning, where you're losing. In the meantime, when the challenge always is when you're at the top of the world and everything's going really well, it's something hard to see, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, what's going to be the new thing. because
Right.
you're relishing your success. And unfortunately, also when you're that way, the people that come to your company don't necessarily have the hunger and the focus, because you're just going to this big company, it's really successful, yay, yay, but usually the seeds are being sown potentially for failure in the future.
So in our conversation earlier, we kind of talked a little bit about second acts and how a lot of times the hardest part about success is recreating it.
Yep.
And you had some great examples of some incredible second acts. Can we start with Bill Gates?
Okay, well, Bill ultimately just has done one act, but I don't know, in the early PC days, and I'm not sure if Bill would agree with this, but most of the stuff, Microsoft got really, had a sweetheart deal given to him when IBM gave him the right to do DOS, and it was almost an invitation to print money. And so during the 80s, towards the end, they were making hundreds of millions of dollars on DOS, and they had a half dozen programmers on it. That would be a good gig, to have. And in the meantime, Bill Gates started a few things. He started Word and Excel, but they were failing. He started, they did big thing. Their big bet was OS/2. They tried Windows originally, and it wasn't very good. Bill almost shut down Windows, literally. He had hundreds of programmers on OS/2, only a dozen on Windows. He once said that he didn't have the heart to shut it down, but he was about ready to kill Windows. We were close to the Windows team. They built it on NetWare. In those days, to build software, the best thing to do is NetWare, sharing all your files and stuff. This is before we have all the cool tools we have today. So, you just shared your files, you could build stuff anyway. So we were close to the Windows team. And they had a couple of versions, and it was really hard to make Windows work, particularly to get into the techie here. 286 mode on the PC was horrible. Anyway, so eventually they figured out how to do it on Windows 3.0, but again, Gates had almost shut down Windows. So my friend Kyle and I were invited. I couldn't go because I was sick, to a party by Bill Gates, and I remember telling Kyle, hey, tell Bill that Windows actually is working now. 3.0 is actually real. And it was really kind of funny because Bill had this party at his house after the meeting, and he spent his whole time with Kyle, probing him about stuff. And Kyle's message was, hey, Windows is really, really good. You ought to do Windows instead of OS/2. Well, about 6 months later, and I'm sure Kyle wasn't the only one that told him that, Microsoft made a big strategic decision, went back to Windows, and sort of the rest is history in terms of where that happened. But the interesting thing that I take from Bill is that he was successful originally with BASIC and DOS. Other stuff wasn't so successful. And definitely OS/2 is a huge failure on his part. But he kind of learned from that and hired smarter people. He didn't have to be the technical, so he got a guy named Dave Cutler in that had actually done a real OS to do Windows NT, and he brought in a guy who'd actually really done networking to compete against us, because named Jim Alchin. And he realized through that what had made him successful earlier on wasn't necessarily going to keep Microsoft going. He had to change the way they focus in development. And so even though most of the stuff he did in the 80s failed, almost everything he did in the 90s was very successful. It's interesting, Bill's an interesting guy, because he tried to buy Novell then. We kind of won. It was fortunate for us because he was betting his whole thing to compete against Novell with OS/2. That was one of the reasons we wanted to promote Windows, is because OS/2 was going to do networking, was going to kill what we were doing. And anyway, so we'd won. We got to 3.6 mode first, and he wanted to buy the company. It was the first time I ever officially met Bill. So Ray and I flew up, and again, he was thinking about buying the company. And first thing out of his mouth, which was interesting, was he said, you have the same mannerisms as Kyle. And it's like, I still haven't figured out why he said that. I think he was sort of just, he was trying to analyze. He'd spent time a year earlier with Kyle, and then he wanted to know who I was, and he was trying to figure out what we were thinking and what we were like. That was the first thing Bill ever told me, which was kind of fun. But he learned. He changed. He had made some mistakes, kind of was failing at some level. Now, again, he was covered by the hundreds of billions or billions of dollars that MS-DOS gave him. If he wouldn't have had that, Microsoft would have failed, given the failures, what they did. But then he learned and changed.
I love how you said he learned and he brought in good people.
Yeah.
He brought in good people.
Well, he realized what had made him successful in the past didn't necessarily take Microsoft to the next level.
Wow. Let's move past Bill and go straight into Steve Jobs. Darn it.
Yeah,
Don't know who
guy,
that is.
another interesting guy. I know Steve a little better because, as you know, Steve did Apple, did really well, brought in John Scully to run it, and got kicked out of his company. And then, of course, in typical Jobsian manner, he said, well, I'll do something better next. So created this other computer company, maybe you probably never heard of it, called Next. It had some really good ideas. It was like next generation of Apple, everything. The problem was timing was right. There was an opportunity in the 80s to do Apple, 70s, 80s, and end of 80s, 90s. There was an opportunity to do a new PC platform at the time. So anyway, so he called up Novell wanting to sell Next to us. And so I have the distinction of visiting Bill or Steve like for 4 years. I go every year and go to RevUniversity and talk to him and different things. And so I have the distinction of turning down Steve Jobs 4 years in a row to come work with me. And okay, I don't think it would have worked still. He needed to go back to Apple, which was good. But anyway, so Steve has said in the past, I've heard that, the best thing that happened to him was getting kicked out of Apple. And the best thing that happened with him is having Next fail, too. And, of course, Apple failed by that time. He comes in, they buy Next technology, comes in and turned it around. And, of course, Steve had certain skills that were really good and certain idiosyncrasies that were sometimes a little hard to deal with. But he definitely had a vision of where things needed to be, and his vision was around hardware and around making it an appliance and easy for a user to use. And of course, tell you when I heard that, I didn't tell him this, but when I heard that he was done the iPod, I was like, why are you going with that? How wrong I was, because he was he just knew let's build devices, computers. The Mac was a device that was significantly easier to use. The same thing with iPod, and then certainly the iPhone and the iPad and stuff. But anyway, I've talked to other friends. Again, the best thing for Steve was those failures, and and Next was kind of a big failure. But at the end of the day, you see what he did afterwards at Apple. No more failures. He'd learned.
So what was different for him when he returned to Apple? What had changed for him?
Well, I don't know fully. I just think he was a little more realistic. I had a really interesting experience with him, and I guess it had to be 2000. I flew over to see Steve, and he just got back to Apple, and I told him, hey, the internet is fast enough that we can now do movies on the internet, but they'd have to be downloaded. And so you usually have to wait a little while, but the internet's fast enough to do that today. And of course, I thought Steve would understand it, owning Pixar and everything. In fact, I was hoping that he would kind of back me, he could get Pixar and put that stuff on the internet, and he would be a lot more open to stuff. But it's funny, Steve just immediately said, nope, that's not going to work. I need to watch the movies immediately. And I go, but the internet's not fast enough there. But he very much dismissed it. And I said, now look, Steve, when you rent videos for your children, and he was starting to be a children at Blockbuster, do you rent them and then you keep them for a few days and you watch them next day. And so this will be the same model. Okay, I select interest, it downloads, and then it watches it a little later. I can watch it, a few hours later. And he immediately lashed out and he said, no, that's not how I do it. I go rent the movie and I immediately watch it with my kids when I come home. And Phil Schiller, who was his VP of marketing, I remember him rolling his eyes. Yeah, here's another Steve thing, and he was so emphatic about it, which was kind of interesting. Of course, he had a point. People want things on demand. If I want it, I want to watch it right now. But at that point, the internet did not have the bandwidth capability. I was still, we're transitioning away from dial-up modems at the time. So anyway, so I thought that would work. He would get it. He didn't. The irony of all this is that in the end, he became the download king of the internet with the iPod and the video iPod and the Apple TV. They all did download models. But I've tried to figure out what was happening. And I think the reality with Steve was he had to see it in a device form. And as soon as he had built these devices, then he realized, hey, downloading isn't that bad a way of getting content into your device. And then, of course, the other irony is I ended up inventing the way to stream video on the internet instantaneously, the HTTP adaptive rate video. And so I was looking forward to, and I never had this discussion, just go to Steve and say, hey, you were right. Oh, and by the way, with your streaming on Apple, you're ripping me off, and I've got a patent, so here you go. No, but he was, so he was right, and I was sort of right, and it sort of the roles sort of flipped in a kind of a ironic fashion. People want to have things when they ask for it immediately, like Steve understood, but there are certain realities in the past where download still makes sense, and even makes sense today. So. Anyway, he's an interesting guy to deal with, and you certainly learned a lot. And I'd always argue with him. You can never. He had to be the smartest guy in the room, and you just always argue. But it was a very positive thing.
So, what was one of the key factors that you feel Steve Jobs learned from his failure that made his second round or second act at Apple successful?
I think he had to be a lot more reasonable in terms of what he was expecting. And the fact that, to turn Apple around, he had to go to Bill Gates and get Bill to give him a loan.
Oh, took some humility probably.
Yeah, a little bit, but he knew what his core value was, his core vision was. It's just a question of how to execute it. And definitely he figured out he needed to have more control. Yeah. He wasn't going to bring in a John Scully who would kick him out second time.
Right.
Anyway.
Okay, well, let's move to you, the most important man in the room.
No.
Drew, you are in the National Computer Hall of Fame along with Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. Let's just applaud that really quickly. And we talked about Novell, and I'd love to hear more from you about some second acts and what you're up to now.
Well, again, Novell was we got lucky. The whole world, when people had PCs, they needed to share resources, and so we wired the world. The challenge was we had to get people actually to wire their offices for networking. You take it for granted today that everything has wiring or Wi-Fi, but originally there wasn't there. So the value had to be high enough, and fortunately, there was enough value with NetWare to, when you had 3 or 4 PCs, you had to have a NetWare servers, countries in Africa used to run their whole country on NetWare sometimes. It was crazy because they just, they had no IT and PCs. And again, the web and that whole stuff, it did not exist. But of course, later that transitioned away, the value went away. And I tried to do stuff with internet caching and video delivery. I was focusing on that. And that's, of course, partly motivated me to go talk to Steve about it. Anyway, so I started another company. I tried to sell some technology to a company called Akamai. Akamai is a content delivery network today that, it's still the big guys that deliver video over the internet, or video and web and all stuff over the internet. I had this really my skill set has always been to build super scalable servers on cheap hardware by clever software. And that's what I still do. I still, even today, program that type of stuff. That's my one and only, my one trick pony. But anyway, so I was trying to sell that to Akamai, and the founder of Akamai came to me and he said, hey, your thing's 10 times faster, but we don't want to buy it from you because we don't really need it. And so Akamai instead was just putting massive amounts of hardware out, and they were kind of the top of the internet bubble, where they raised hundreds of millions of dollars, and billions of dollars, and anyway, so they didn't need it, and so that got me really frustrated. So I decided, well, I'll create my own company, and I'm going to focus on video delivery, and I won't do the way Akamai's doing. I'll be opposite of that. So I got a company. I called it Xlon. And I was still working at Novell, and I was using it to kind of sell the Novell technologies, or as a consumer of the Novell technologies. But I kind of make this assumption that people would figure out how to do video over the internet. And there was standards, and it was all proprietary, and different things were happening, and it just wasn't working. Video kind of wasn't coming. And so, hence I talked to Steve, let's do download. It wasn't. And I had this block in my mind that was keeping me from fixing it, or knowing how to fix it, because I understood networking and stuff. And so, literally, the company was failing because video was supposed to be expensive, and I was gonna, or video was supposed to work on the internet, and I was gonna come up with a better solution. I had a better architecture to deliver video than what Akamai had, but video wasn't working. And so kind of at the point of super failure, or wanting, the company, what am I gonna do here? There was this block in my mind that was keeping me from inventing how to make video work. And what kind of triggered me to get away from it is this is early YouTube, when I saw that YouTube wasn't doing the traditional ways of doing streaming. It was a client-server architecture. Everyone had invented it, and it was fundamentally wrong of how they were doing video in those days. Apple, Adobe, Microsoft, all of them were doing it the wrong way. And then YouTube came in and said, no, I'm to use this stuff. I'll just do what they call progressive file download. And again, this is in the day when video is really small, and usually you download the video, and you'd say, do you want it low, medium, or high? The user had to check. It was very primitive of how you got video. But YouTube had figured out, hey, we'll just do progressive download, which was, we'll start downloading the video file, and we'll see kind of how fast it is, and it's at some point when it's fast enough, it's got enough, and we know it's going at this rate, then we can start playing the video. And sometimes you had to wait a little while for the video to start, depending on your speed, but eventually, and of course, if the network got screwed up, then it would still hiccup, it would still stop. But anyway, it was just a real simple thing. It was just file download. And of course, I invented file servers 20 years earlier. I understood that. But what YouTube was doing is too simple. And so then it kind of hit me, I had this block, I can't fix that. I'm gonna be this. I'm gonna be the video CDN, but video doesn't work. So it wasn't too hard to kind of say, well, I guess I got to fix video instead. And I had another block that I didn't want to. It would be too hard to do a client. And when that block left, and suddenly it just kind of exploded. And literally within, I can't remember, less than a half hour, I'd invented HTTP adaptive rate streaming, and it brought everything together. It totally, like, live was the same as VOD. In the past, live was always different than V on demand. Like live television versus CDs or video. And so anyway, it all came together into one thing. I got live, time shifting. It all was cheaper. It went through firewalls. It did everything, and no one had thought of it. And of course, we obsoleted all the investment that Apple and these other guys had done, but they all switched eventually to this. Unfortunately, we didn't get the patent soon enough to be able to enforce it. We're kind of trying to enforce it now, but all the video on the internet now uses what I had pioneered, and it was going to be something else. But I had this block that kept me from seeing it until doing it. And I think that's something you have to think about sometimes. There's sometimes things that they're holding you back from doing what you can do, but stupid things are holding you. The stupid assumption you're making that actually keep it from happening. And then, again, in my case, it was like really literally an explosion. I've been thinking about video for 10 years, you know, how to do it on the internet, and suddenly, and I realized the other things were broken, and I realized, you know, how to do it the correct way.
I love what you said when we were chatting earlier, and you said sometimes there are certain beliefs you have that keep you from seeing things that are obvious, and you have to realize what they are.
Yeah.
Would that refer back to the blocks that you were having?
Yeah, that's kind of the same thing. It's just, you know, in the end, after you're blind, it's really obvious that you should have seen this, but you didn't.
Right.
For me, it was just I didn't think I could change those protocols. I didn't think I was positioned or empowered, and then when I realized how bad it was and everything else, it was like, you know, at least how the video streaming. You got to remember that video streaming in 2005, 2006, it cost you like 30 cents per gigabyte. So if you wanted to do something high, it would cost, you know, 10, 20 cents per hour to stream. It's incredibly expensive. And the approach we took dropped the price down like a fourth or something, into a fourth, and then now it's down to almost nothing. You know, and the only unfortunate thing was we couldn't, you know, invented all this. My company, that's how I ended up at Dish with Sling TV, was that we couldn't transition the business model fast enough to get the patent soon enough. Almost got Netflix to use our stuff. They ended up using something from Microsoft, and I didn't have a patent to shut them down at the time. And in the meantime, my VCs kind of ran out of steam and decided to sell. And so, you know, I didn't get to exploit it. Netflix did, but more power to them.
So,
But we did something. I did something different with Sling TV.
So of all the ventures that you've been a part of, and of all of the successes and failures and second acts that you've witnessed and you've seen, what was one challenge that appeared repeatedly across the board?
Oh, I think the biggest thing is thinking the old way. You know, there's if you're successful, you're going to have a bunch of strengths, and you're going to rely on those strengths, and you're going to think, and it worked once for you, but it doesn't necessarily work again. And trying to sort through that and getting through that in your mind as to what you can and can't do, and the assumptions about yourself and about your talents. And, you know, I almost call it billionaire-itis. You know, it's like, particularly for billionaires, which I never was one, but, you know, you get to where you think you got the Midas touch, you understand all this stuff. Obviously you did, because, you know, you're a billionaire. But to continue is hard sometimes, especially if you're dealing with a big transition, because what you did in the past doesn't necessarily, even your skills don't necessarily match what's needed in the next thing. And you're going to have to be open to change and get rid of those blocks and look things differently. And sometimes that's pretty hard. And sometimes when you're big, it's you miss things, but you have all this money to keep you going for a while until suddenly it's gone.
What was one of the moments where you felt the value of your idea was validated?
Number of times. In the case of the you know, adaptive rate streaming, I knew enough of the problems and stuff, and have been trying to make it successful, that it was like, I knew for sure it was going to work. I knew it was going to dominate. When we went and pitched it to Microsoft, and the main Microsoft architect in the back of the end, I remember he said, we hadn't even thought of this. You know, it's like the light turned on to him too, you know, and he just realized all we've done the last 10 years is obsolete. This is the way to do it now. And so in that case, it was pretty obvious. Sometimes you don't know till you know, till it really happens. You know, and ultimately it's when you engage in the market. You know, quite often you think you understand what your customers need, you build something, you think you've got it for them, they go out, and then it's not exactly what they needed. But maybe it's a part, and maybe at that point's when you really realize, if you have the flexibility to say what their real need is. But you've got to be open to have made some mistakes.
So whether it's your first run for success or a second act, what factors should we look for when identifying true value?
Well, I think the biggest thing is just do people really want it? Does it really deliver value to them? And sometimes things are obvious. It was kind of obvious to everyone in the industry. Eventually, video would get on the internet. The problem is they were going down the wrong path, and there was a better way of doing it. And for me, the reason I saw the better way is because I was dealing with potential failure of my company. I had to have some sort of breakthrough thing, but things weren't working.
We're going to open it up for audience questions a little bit early because I'm sure there are plenty. So if you have a question, raise your hand and we will run some microphones around. Oh, that was quick. Perfect.
What are the secrets to having a good working relationship with a CTO?
For me, I was extremely lucky to have Ray Norda as a CTO. He was just a very honest, truthful guy, high integrity. Some of the other ones I've dealt with haven't been as good, and that's harder. I had challenges with Eric Schmidt. He got kind of lucky and left and picked up another gig that did it a little better than Novell. Again, I think it's a challenge to help them see kind of what's the reality. I'm always coming through from a technology standpoint of I know I can build this and this is going to be kind of valuable and here's how we'll have an advantage. So I look at it through that lens, and getting a CEO to see it through that lens sometimes is hard.
Meaning what can be built?
Yeah, what can be built, and then whether it's worth building, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. Success comes. You have to get a whole bunch of things right. Again, in my case, adaptive rate streaming with Move Technologies, the company I sold to Dish. We didn't get the full business thing right. Netflix did.
Kind of going off that last question, how do you maintain good people to work with and avoiding people like a John Scully to work with you?
Sometimes you don't know. I've been fortunate that I've only worked usually with a small group of other people, and I still code. I still enjoy building things. That's because that's my strength, and so I can attract usually some pretty good people to work with me technically. How to map that fully into the business is still struggling. I have a few struggles at Sling TV doing that today. You definitely want to look for integrity. Almost all good engineers have tremendous integrity. I'm not sure on some of the other positions whether that's as important, but you got to be real. When we were clicking at Novell, we had a very small team. Half dozen. The core team was 4 of us, and we had a few other people around it. It was crazy for a while. Our R&D budget was less than 1% of the company. The value had exploded. People were buying it, and we didn't have to develop very much. But that's because we had this super tight core thing, and the opportunity was so big. We just happened to get there first. Fortunately, Bill Gates didn't understand networking, and so he couldn't compete with us.
First of all, thank you so much, right here. I really appreciate the honest feedback that you've given on some of the topics that Bree's brought up. I feel like I'm facing some blocks in my business, and it's been encouraging to hear that you've been in similar situations, and I just am curious what you did. I mean, Are there exercises that you did? Did you work with mentors to kind of help you work through those blocks or cope with them and the self-doubt that can come from being in that position?
Well, you have to try to be real. You have to. If you're trying to do something new, you obviously have to have some faith, and you kind of believe that things are going to work out certain ways, and that's what motivates you. And you think you have a value proposition that you're going to promote, and in my case, I've got usually some technology things that I think I can build something way better than someone else, and so there'll be a technology barrier for competitors. But then you face the reality of what the real market was after you build it. And for me, just trying to be, to face up to the reality versus what your hope is hard, but it's, you have to be open to that and say, oh, what am I learning now? Why isn't this working? What is wrong with it? And that's kind of the challenge, because sometimes you need to still keep blazing through, make it work if you really understand that it's, if you believe it, but you got to be listening to what's happening. Why isn't this selling? Why aren't people all excited, about this? And face that reality, or the other, oh my God, my competitor has something better than what I've got. Or people going here, it's, I think in the end, it's reality. It's mostly in yourself, and you can have other people as mentors, as sounding boards, but in the end, it's your baby. It's your decisions you've got to own fully.
Hey, Drew, you look the same.
Well, I'm a little older, and I went to see my dermatologist a couple days ago, so I got little spots on my head. But other than that, my dermatologist loves me. That I went to the sun. When did I used to get burned?
I'm sorry to hear that.
No.
I would be interested to hear your unrealized vision for Sling. You've got content that's coming from all these different areas. Cord cutters want to go a la carte completely. You've got everybody and their dog trying to put together these streaming services to displace Netflix. But you have this underlying vision that you would like to see happen with Sling. What's that? And how can we help you do that?
Well, again, Sling was the first pay TV bundle onto the internet using this technology. I chose to stay with Dish because it seemed like I built some interesting technologies for streaming video and VOD and whatever, and but the TV business has a lot of other bigger interests, so just being a technology supplier didn't seem to be enough. So I felt like I could enable Dish to get there on a leadership thing, which we did, and we're still the number one, but of course we got good competitors with Hulu and YouTube TV coming at us, Google. I think the difference we have right now is we're still focusing on kind of fixing television, packaging it together, because you can argue that traditional TV is going to kind of keep declining, but there's still a lot of value that you can put on top of television, particularly around advertising. TV advertising is, it's like $70 billion a year, $75 billion a year, and almost all of it's the old 80-year-old model of, put an ad in a show, and if certain people watch this show, then they may see your ad, and that obviously worked when it was broadcast, wire, radio type stuff. But now it's different, but transitioning the ad thing, and because every household in America still, the television advertisers spend $50-$60 per household in America still for TV advertising, and most of it's the way TV works today is the vast majority of your ads are wasted. People either see them too much or you miss people that didn't see them at all. So it's a combination and that's just inherent to the old model. And then the question of how to fix that, that's another thing I'm working on right now. And I think the net will be that someone like Sling TV, we can double or triple the advertising revenue that we're traditionally getting and give tremendous value to the TV advertisers and to the users. So users won't see the same ad, they'll see things a little more relevant. But how to transition the old model into the new model. We're positioned by taking the old content, old style content, and putting it on the internet to fix that. And believe it or not, I don't think YouTube, even though they, you know, obviously Google owns a tremendous amount of advertising, you know, they're a huge thing. But, and YouTube is very advertised, but this is a different problem. This is a problem of fixing television advertising from the past and putting it into the future. And they're only doing the future stuff, but there's a you know, with what they do with YouTube. So anyway, so that's what's keeping me there and moving. I still see fixes there and other fixes in television. And yeah, the whole television industry is turning upside down. And who's gonna land, who's gonna win, who's gonna lose, it's kind of unknown. And yet, I think there's fixes to the old model, and there's certain advantages of television today for advertising that the internet will never have. So,
Drew, from your seasoned perspective, how does Utah stand as an entrepreneurial location? What are its strengths and weaknesses, and/or does location even matter anymore?
Well, you know, when I graduated from college, I actually had worked for a couple of years as a consultant out of Silicon Valley building word processors. That was my first real job, and I got fortunate to get connected up there. And when I graduated from college, there was nothing here. I could go into YCAT, I could have gone to iRing Science, or there's just dumb, small computer science programming things. And got fortunate to go to Novell, and then, you know, of course, Novell, we ended up with thousands of people, and then we merged. That kind of laid a great foundation. I think there are fundamental advantages here, which is why things continue to explode. Now, personally, I don't like the idea of calling it Silicon Slopes, because it has nothing to do with silicon, but I understand why they do it. But it's exciting to see all that activity. That's incredible. I think, you know, with software and stuff, there still needs to be kind of a synergy of people together sometimes. And I don't think our ecosystem is close, you know, as Silicon Valley, but it's getting better and it's easier. And you know, you look at some of the success. You know, not everything's going to be super successful here. There'll be a lot of failures, but the fact we have so many things going is incredible. And I think there's some core strengths in the colleges, the people here, the whole thing. I'm neighbor to Gary Herbert. In fact, I used to visit him every month. And he, of course, always gives me the runaround of how great Utah is. And I believe him. I think he sees it. So there's some pluses, some significant pluses here that I think things are, you know, at least a decade or more of eventually it'll get too big and things will screw up like they always do on the cycles. But right now, there's nothing that's stopping us for a while. It's just we need more programmers. I need to hire 3 guys who wants to, you know, working on some fun stuff. It's hard to find good people because there's so much demand right now.
We have time for 1 or 2 more. Oh yeah, in the far.
I would say a follow-up question to that is, how do you navigate, so I'll say this, notwithstanding every business needs to be profitable to be successful and grow, but notwithstanding that, how do you navigate through the money grabbing that gets in the way of ideas that need to flow, because this area has a lot of really incredible, I mean, the TV was invented here in this area, and I mean, we could go on forever about the ideas and potential here. How do you navigate through that and or bring people together through organizations like this to make something happen?
Well, I don't know. The reason I came here is I was just intrigued by what you guys are doing here, which is a nice incubation going. I don't think we have the mega bucks here, but we can tap into it in terms of getting VC and money and the angel investment. I think that's a big thing. I think it's strengthening. The more success there is, there's more money. One good thing about this industry is usually, the people that, create a good company, make a bunch of money, at that point become angel investors and seed a bunch of other things. And there's a great synergy and critical mass that's achieved there, which I think is a big thing that's feeding what's happening right now. And hopefully that will continue. I think that's kind of fundamental with tech entrepreneurship. You made your bunch of money, and then you find other people, and you want to help other people and go. And so it's if you have ideas, I think it's easier to find money now than it ever was, and I think you have to know that that's going to improve. The more success, the key is to have more success around here, and then that just there's a lot of positives, and I think we're beyond a critical mass now in this area, which is tremendously exciting to see for me.
I have a quick question. Your company, Sling, your parent company,
Dish, yeah.
Dish in Charlie, Oregon, have a 5G play. So I want to get your take on 5G, where it's heading. Does it play a part in Sling? How important is mobility as well? And then the last follow-up question is, what is the next big thing if you were to?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the next big thing is.
If we all knew we'd capitalize on it.
I'm still more on the television side. I consult a little bit with the 5G side. It has some interesting challenges for us. My head's down is to start generating, make Sling TV a lot more, revenue positive in terms of profitability, which is hard, very hard, because you got to sign deals where you have to, they keep ratcheting up the amount of money it costs us to buy content. And that's just inherent nature of the television thing, which is why, again, if I could get 2 or 3 times more of the advertising dollars, that would be big. I think 5G is going to be interesting. It's hard to know fully exactly how it will be. I think anytime you have a big switch like that, usually what you were thinking it was going to be useful for won't necessarily be the thing that it actually ends up being it. I'm not sure if having all cars interconnected really fast all the time, maybe that's incredible and that's what's going to take to make self-driving cars, but I don't know. I kind of doubt it. I think there'll be something that no one's understands today that will be enabled by better universal connectivity that'll emerge at some point, and maybe someone in this area will figure that out. So it's always when you make those transitions, people always see it from the past, the lens of the past, but hopefully there's someone in the future. It's like when we did networking originally with Novell. Networks were built, the Ethernet were built to do terminals, to support terminals into mini computers. That was a motivation for the original networks, local area networks. And we got lucky to realize, hey, file sharing for PCs is the way to actually use it. I would guess that same type of thing will happen with 5G.
Great. Okay, last question that we always ask each founder that comes in. What is something fun your success has allowed you to do?
Well, have a houseboat at Lake Powell.
Ooh.
And I just bought some fast jet skis. I still
We need to be better friends.
do that. Yeah, I did. And I got at least 300 horsepower jet skis, and I got kicked off a couple months ago with it. And, it was good to be, I hadn't been flipped off for 10 years, and it was good to
Refreshing.
remind me the laws of physics, and and motion and everything, that they still work the way they're supposed to work. So.
Oh, good. Well, Drew, thank you so much for being with us. We have a gift for you. I'm going to invite Jason back up on the stage.
Okay.
And thank you so much. One more time for Drew.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Bree. Drew, really appreciate your time. Another round of applause for Drew, please. So, Drew, I love how you said right at the beginning, if you have a baby, it'd be good to be bankrupt. We had 4, and
Okay,
we felt
probably
bankrupt,
helped.
right?
Yeah.
But I also love that you said that sometimes what you need is a failure, right? And then you can plow through that and come out the other end even better. So, and it's just cool that you're like first name basis, Bill, Steve, just these names. That's crazy.
A little bit.
But we would like to give you this. This is our Rev Road messenger bag. We filled it with some
Well, looks
swag,
good.
so you can just
Okay.
preach the message of Rev Road around.
Yeah, it
and
looks
just
pretty
carry
solid.
us with you. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you again, Drew. Appreciate it. And do stick around because people are going to want to mob you afterwards, and we're going to take some pictures.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Okay, so yeah, you can.
I'll go sit down.
Yeah, right back here with Bart.
Yeah. That's
All right,
replace
so
my other one.
3 announcements, and I know I'm the only thing standing between you and lunch. I do understand that. The first thing I'm going to do is tell you about our next RevU, which is with Travis Hansen of Tassani Companies, and I believe that is October 3rd. So we got a video, just a teaser video on that. We're going to play that right now. Oh, it's over on this side. Maybe. There it goes. And technical difficulties today. Okay, so that's Travis Hansen of Tassani Companies, and he's going to be talking to us, and we're just going to have a great time with him. But right now, I do want to bring up Darren. He's got a quick announcement. So this is Darren Hill. He's the CEO of Rev Road. Yeah,
Hey.
that's appropriate. It is
Good to be with
appropriate to
you.
clap.
Hello, Sarah. You always make me happy when I see you. A couple of quick things. First of all, Drew, I totally agree about the whole silicon slopes things. I mean, what does it have to do with silicon? Nothing. Rev Road it has everything to do with revenue. So we love that. And also just wanted to echo your comment about what we need more of. We need more programmers. And I'm going to do a shameless plug for Skillstruck back here. Skillstruck is creating those programmers every single day. They teach it like they teach piano lessons. So if any of you want to help create more programmers, send your kids to Skillstruck, have them sign up, and if you own a business, meet with Skillstruck because they have this awesome corporate program where you can go in and you can make it an employee benefit for your employees' kids to learn to code. And that creates all kinds of stickiness. It makes them want to stay. Okay, so, and I had one other thing that I told you I was going to do. Oh, at 1 o'clock, when you're done with lunch, if you want to do a tour of Rev Road and learn more about what we do, meet over here at the portfolio company wall. And I'll give anyone a tour who's there at that time. And that was it. Yeah. So, hey, thanks, everyone.
Okay. No, this is the, I got it. Thank you, AJ. All right. This is the last thing we want to announce before lunch. This is the Rev Road Rally, and it is going to be September 20th from 3 to 7. It's up at Orem City Center Park. It's just going to be a great time. There's going to be lots of really cool cars, lots of things to see and do, food trucks. We will have honored guests there. Some of our special needs community members will be up there to have this great experience with these cool cars. So we would love for you to all come out, bring your family, and just have a great time and just enjoy yourselves. So remember that, September 20th, 3 to 7 at Orem City Center Park.
And it's free.
Oh, yeah, free. Just show up.
And if you have a cool car, let us know, and you can come bring
We
it.
would put the cool car in there.
Yeah.
So, all right, where is Richard still here? I think I saw him. Come on back up. So we always end all our meetings and events like this with a special cheer. We do ready, set, and then rev. And remember, like Darren said, rev is all about revenue, about revving your engine, about getting going. And since you are awesome at firing people up, I want you to lead this cheer. So it's ready, set, and then everybody just rev.
All right.
Okay?
Ready? Ready, set, rev!